Welcome to Spider-Verse Minute, the tri-weekly podcast where we watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 1 minute at a time. I'm Sean Slater.
And I'm his sister Caroline.
And today we're watching minute 35, which opens with Miles laying on the ground after a fall and ends a minute later with Miles visiting Peter's grave.
I have titled this minute, The Cemetery.
Yeah, I think that's a very apt title for this minute, and we'll get into why later, but why don't you start off with what the notes you have?
I don't have much for it. There's really only two. The first one is when he pulls out the flashback from his pocket. We saw in the previous minute the snap. This is when Miles discovers it. And there's just this beautiful single instrument of this sad, somber, I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, it sounds like a some kind of horn or something like a French horn.
It's definitely a horn.
Something along those lines. And yeah, it's just this really slow, somber, drawn out notes that like you said. And yeah, I think it fits it fits the tone perfectly here. It's not anything super bombastic or anything like, oh, it broke, dun dun dun.
I think what I like best about it is that it shows Miles regret right away, it always shows it that, and it's a great transition into the cemetery, which again we'll talk about when we get there. But yeah. I love the use of that as a transition.
Yeah, it also does a really good job of just conveying his emotions. You can really get even though he's got the mask on, you know exactly the facial expression he has.
Yeah.
And they even do a good job of his eyes are lower in the eye holes of the mask, and so you can tell he's a bit downtrodden. He also really hit that ground hard.
Yeah, so I imagine he's fall. Also in pain.
Yeah, I wonder if it was the hitting the cab that did it, or that finally broke it, or if he hit the edge of the curb there.
The previous minute seems to imply that it was him when he hit the curb because he landed right on his hip.
Yeah.
Which is the side. So I think that's what broke it.
Yeah. Even though it was literally 30 seconds ago, I forgot about the whole pop up as it broke. I guess not even 30 seconds ago. It was 10 seconds ago.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
But, yeah.
The other note I have is when it starts, zooming away from Miles and his just staying on the ground state. First off, it starts
catching
snowing.
His breath.
Yeah, it starts snowing, which I just think is really cool. But second, we see 4 and a 2 laying right next to him. 42.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that's not a Douglas Adams reference. A lot of people usually see those and they immediately think of that, but
that's I won't lie, that's immediately what I thought.
Yeah, and I think we touched on it in minute 2 when the lottery ball comes up with the 42 on it.
I think we did, but very briefly.
And we might have also touched on it when we first see the spider in the the spray painting scene. But in case we didn't, the number was picked because it's Jackie Robinson's number. And Brian Bendis, who was Miles' creator, specifically picked it for that. And that's the reason why you see 42 a bunch in the movie and around Miles, and not because he's a huge Douglas Adams fan.
I do love the fact that they just kind of keep sprinkling it everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a fun Easter egg that keeps getting brought up, and in different ways too. I love the creativity behind how they keep bringing it up. It's not oh, it's 42 again.
Yeah, this one came from the sign being broken and the way the numbers landed.
Yeah, and it's and they're never obvious references either. They're it's a lottery ball, and I remember we talked about how that also kind of coincides with Miles getting into
visions
through lottery.
Yeah.
The spider, it's very cool because that's how he gets his powers. And then this one, he just bumps into it on the sign and it just falls. Like, it's very creative. It's not like, oh, there's 42 on a jersey. There's an Easter egg. Like, that feels like very on the head kind of Easter egg. This one has a fun, like, creative, like, 42.
Yeah. The other note I had about this minute as well was just less of a note, more of a question, but I really hope that Cab has good insurance, because he's going to come back and there's just going to be a hole, or not a hole, but like a big dent in his roof.
Oh, yeah, good point.
And I'm guessing Miles doesn't leave his information. He probably, would that be considered a hit and run?
Falling
yeah, I mean, he did hit it just with his body.
Yeah,
from above. But
I don't know.
Spider-Man's going to be charged with,
Yeah, I don't. It'll be
Spider-Man immediately starting out as a felon.
I have not seen any cameras, so he might be in the clear.
Yeah.
This might just be a mystery.
Yeah, it was a really big bird that
what
fell.
Happened here? Well, then he'll see the numbers, and it's like, I think the sign broke.
Yeah. And so we move on to the church.
After Miles runs away, trying to find an excuse.
Yeah. Or not, and just leaves.
Just leaves.
But you brought up, like, the snow, and I did kind of chuckle, like, the snow is just the rain of the winter. Where it's like, it's a sad scene because it's snowing / raining.
Well, I will say this, too, as well, kind of going on top of that. Snow is often used in literature as a symbol of death. Yeah.
Symbol of death or purity. Like, the pure white coating of snow.
And then, this is more spring, but it still kind of coincides with snow, is the cleansing. Like, cleansing, bringing into a new... Yeah. I love the snow motif. I also just think it's fitting for this moment.
Yeah, it cuts to, watching the snow in the church.
I just gotta say, that is a wallpaper moment if I've ever seen one.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely one of the calmer wallpaper moments, but I just think it's such a pretty shot.
It feels like it would be one of those dynamic wallpapers where it's like, oh, it's just this still background, and then, like, they have, like, oh, just the snow falling or something like that. Like, it would make a really nice one of those.
Oh, yeah, it would. Oh, I want that
now. And the thing I think I noticed, it's kind of hard to tell, but the that I thought was that this is the same church that the MJ and Aunt May's speech was done in front of, but you can't really tell if they're
I thought they
doing it in front of a church.
Yeah, it looked more like a city hall to me, just because there was, like, buildings, so there was, like, a lot of the city around and stuff.
Yeah, they don't really give you a big open shot, like a faraway shot. It's just kind of the front doors, but
it's definitely hard to tell.
Yeah, and the one thing I did notice, though, is that this is a church and not a synagogue, which means that in this Earth, Peter was not Jewish, where Peter's not typically, like, because Stan Lee and a lot of the early, like, comic book artists and writers and whatnot were Jewish. A lot of the times, like, there's hints of that, like, the characters themselves are Jewish because they're writing what they know, and they know what it means to be Jewish. So a lot of times you'll see, like, Peter have a bar mitzvah and or just, like, do small things that, like, hint at his Jewishness, but never really outright stated. And then, like, sometimes when it's adapted, it's kind of, like, ignored because it's never really outright stated. Like, oh, if there's a story where he gets married, sometimes it's just in a church, which, like, if MJ is not Jewish, then maybe it could be seen that way. But yeah, it's something that's usually done. In this one, he's obviously not Jewish because he's buried in a Christian cemetery.
Yeah, they don't really show any hints of it in this movie and this universe that he is at all.
That Peter Parker is.
That Peter
Yeah.
Parker is, yeah. I will. Switching to Miles.
Yeah.
When we first see him walking through the cemetery, I couldn't help but like think like, oh, is this like a walk of shame at the moment?
Yeah.
Like you can tell.
It's still too late for that to be. Usually that happens early in the morning.
It could be early in the morning. I don't know. We don't know what time it is. It's dark. That's all we know.
That's true.
I will also point out that like we see him, we get a shot of him behind. Did you notice that he still has the tag on his costume?
Yeah.
Why didn't he take that off?
I also do love how it just like is too big or too small for him, and so he's just got the big gap in the back where it's like tied around.
There's his t-shirt.
I wonder. It's very reminiscent. We didn't touch on it when he first bought it, but it's very reminiscent of like early superhero costumes, and I guess like those cheaper superhero costumes that are just like, oh yeah, you tie it in the back. It's a little loose. The material's not great.
Yeah, it's definitely. They still make those like the very cheapy.
Yeah, I guess
like,
makes sense for what like Miles probably could buy with like his pocket change.
Mm-hmm. What, you don't think a store that sells hero guy costumes are going to be a high-end costumes?
They probably have high-end costumes there, but Miles probably can't afford them because he's in, what, 8th grade? Whatever he said, 7th, 8th grade. And his parents don't seem to be the ones to just, like, give him copious amounts of cash.
His dad is definitely a you earn money by doing chores type guy.
Yeah.
And even then.
Yeah. He probably doesn't get an allowance.
But his mom sneaks him money every now and again.
Yeah, but it's different from an allowance. Like,
oh, totally.
It'd be hard for him to, like, he'd have to pull like a me, where when his mom gives him $5, he only spends 2 of it. He's like, oh yeah, I'll get you the change later. And later is when he wants to buy something big and suddenly has $200 in change. And then the other thing I noticed too is on his gravestone. We were talking about this when the like news first broke of when his birthday was. On the gravestone it says 91, which means he wouldn't have had his birthday yet in that year. So he has a late, November, Decemberary birthday. February? Was that what it was?
It was Decemberary.
That's a real month. Yeah. February. Nope, that's just
that's an actual month. No, it's just Decemberary.
Yeah.
It's great. I'm glad you brought up the headstone too, because I also wrote down the date. I'm like, oh, I remember we gotta like address that. But I also want to talk about like just the amount of stuff left at Peter's grave. I feel a little bad. There's a great wide shot where you just see how far it goes, and I'm like, that's just the whole cemetery pretty much. But I feel bad for the people buried next to him.
Yeah, it takes over a couple of the other headstones.
It's like these people are just trying to rest.
Or like the groundskeeper that has to like clean it all up and eventually.
And then he's gonna have to do that from the snow, and there was like pictures there. Like that's gonna be. Oh, I feel so bad for that groundskeeper.
The paper's gonna get all like wet and sticky,
destroyed. And like he might just leave this there. And like, you know what? You fertilize the grass.
Well, just this stuff's biodegradable, right? One thing that you'll notice is there's a newspaper amongst all of the stuff. Maybe from like it's probably that edition that like the day that he died, and it's just got it's from the Daily Bugle, and it's just got a big headline that says Spider-Man dead, but the subheading is Peter Parker 27 kept New York safe for years, found dead in front of Daily Bugle. So there's 2 big things there. One, this says he was 27. In the like news report it said he was 26. So that could be an instance of just the news is a lot more instant, and so they in the in-universe explanation would be like, yeah, it's just that they got it wrong for his age, and so he is 27. But this yeah, and then like the newspaper was able to get out his correct age a bit later. It could also be like they weren't sure how old they were going to make him yet, like out of universe they weren't sure how old Peter was supposed to be, and so like probably bounced around a couple times. Like
we want to make him young. We want to make his death as tragic as possible.
Young, but not too young, because they do talk about like how he's, was protecting New York for a decade. I think. I think that's his, in his like intro in the beginning of the movie. He talks about protecting it for 10 years or so.
Yeah, because I think we talked that would have made him about 16, 17.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, again, because we weren't sure of his exact age then. And then the other thing, too, that I wanted to point out was the fact that he was just, like, in front of the Daily Bugle. So, like, was he just laying there? Like, how did that happen? Did Kingpin just, like, walk by, drop the body off, and then, like, leave? Because that is very, like, could you imagine being that person to, like, first report that?
This is also, like, in public. Like, that's in the city. You don't just drop that off.
Kingpin would be able to.
Probably. Still though.
Like, it was probably like a late at night kind of thing, and depending on where the Daily Bugle is, it might not be that busy, and so you just have like a van, drive up, open the door, dump it off, drive away. And then the other thing too, around the grave, you talked about all the pictures, is all of those drawings were done by the children from the people who worked on the project. So those are all like actual kid drawings.
That's adorable and really fun choice. Another cool thing I think they did with using the headstone is right when Miles starts talking to Peter, they do this great shot where it actually starts behind the headstone and then slowly lifts to reveal Miles, and I think it's just such a cool shot.
Yeah, it's really like neat the way they like, because you're following Miles from behind, and then suddenly it like pans up and he's walking towards you, and you're like, oh, how did you get there?
You almost feel like it's almost like they're trying to make you feel like Peter's spirit listening to Miles.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of explaining it.
Peter's spirit just comes from the ground, looks at Miles, and like, oh, hey, dude. Wait, why do you have that look on your face?
Yeah.
Oh no. Nah, he's probably spiritually comforting Miles, like, dude, it's okay, we'll figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a neat, like, you're suddenly, Miles is talking to Peter, who's like, yeah, the audience is sitting in his spot.
It's a very good shot, and I think what really helps give the shot like its emotional weight, and what really makes me think it's like Miles is talking to us, is when he's talking, he has such regret in his voice.
Yeah.
You can just tell that it's almost like a little kid talking to his parents for something like he didn't, like something like a bad mistake. Like it's such a teenager moment. It's such a powerful moment for him.
I would say it's younger than teenager. Like, it's a Miles feeling like a child because he failed this person that he really looks up to.
Yeah.
And it's even less of like failing a parent and more of failing like a mentor.
Yeah.
Because like usually like with a mentor, you always want to live up to their expectations, and here Miles feels like he failed those expectations and just like doesn't know how to complete his promise because he broke the USB.
Yeah. It's such a great moment for Miles.
Yeah, and the animators were talking about how, like, this whole scene and this whole moment was really hard to get done and took a really, really long time because this was the first scene that they did and started working on. And so they were trying to establish like all of the rules and the way things work. And you'll notice even with like this one, like if you like look really closely, like Miles, you can tell they're still trying to figure out like how to make Miles tick and work with it, and even like establishing rules like, oh, what gets animated on the ones and versus what gets animated on the twos, and like how does the scenery even work, and like lighting and stuff, and like you can see with the street lights, like the light shooting out of them is dotted, so like setting up rules like that, and the way things are supposed to move and stuff like that. So like as they were working on this, they were still trying to figure out how things should be working.
Yeah, this scene is animated beautifully, but it does make me wonder, like, I wonder how many like drafts and how many different times they had to almost animate the scene just to figure out, like, oh, no, that doesn't look right, try it this way.
Yeah,
okay,
there was,
yeah, that
like,
looks better.
One of the things, too, is even just, like, because it's so far into the movie, like, they still weren't set on, like, how things were going to progress at this point. And, like, the story wasn't even completed. Like, not completed, but, like, the way the story flowed wasn't done quite yet. And so, like, there was debates as to, like, oh, whether, like, should Miles walk in with a limp or should he just walk in normally, because like he just fell from the building, but like sometimes he didn't, and so like it wouldn't make sense for him to have a limp then, and like even just like having to like redo things like that.
Yeah, or like even if we consider like the alternate scenes that they had earlier, like should Genki be with him, or should he be alone? There's a lot of questions that I could see them, and there does seem to be a lot of pressure with this scene, but I think it's nailed so well.
Yeah.
So do you have any other notes for this minute?
Yeah, that's everything I have.
Yeah, that's all I have as well. So thank you all for listening to this minute, and we will see you on Friday with minute 36. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Bye.